Welcome to the CCFR Radio Podcast, your source for news, updates, and stories from the CCFR.
Hey everybody, welcome to the CCFR Radio Podcast, Episode 6. Oh, we're up to 6 already. I'm your always reluctant host, Rod Giltakis, still hosting. I'll go ahead and use this opportunity right away to mention, don't forget, if you are interested in hosting the CCFR Radio Podcast, or you know somebody that's interested in hosting it, please send us an email and a demo tape / demo file at podcast@firearmrights.ca. I'm actually, to be honest with you guys, I'm having a lot of fun doing this. It's kind of neat. And, you're going to see this. I think it's getting better and better. You're going to hear in this episode a lot of different audio elements, and I'm kind of packing all this cool stuff in here. So it's been a neat project, but I just don't have time to do it. So help a brother out. And if you're interested, please don't be shy and send us your information and your demo file. I'd really like to hand this thing off. So anyway, enough of my pleading for help on that one. Hopefully you enjoy it. All right. This week, I'm not going to do too much of an update. Because a lot, oddly enough, I'm thinking, well, what can I update people on? And unfortunately, the majority of the stuff we're doing, we don't want people to know about it until we're releasing it, because that's sort of just how it works with companies and with societies and groups like ours. So one thing I can allude to, which might be interesting, get the wheels turning, is I spent an hour and a half on the phone today with a longtime supporter of the CCFR who is helping me with the next contest. Now, this contest is going to be the coolest thing that we've done so far. I know it's hard to believe because the contests that we've done at the CCFR have been really, really cool. So this one, I can't tell you what it is. We'll probably release information around the middle or end of October on this one. It will be the biggest contest ever and very different from anything we've done before. But the only hint I'm going to give you guys to kind of just, I guess, torture you at some level is it will involve some travel. All right. And it'll involve some travel, and it will be sometime in the new year. So anyway, wherever that leads you, I have no control over that, but that's your, I know it's very vague, but it's something. All right. So anyway, as far as any other updates, I'm going to wait till the following podcast, and that way I've got a little bit more to say. Now, the other thing I'm going to do in this episode is I'm going to provide an episode of CCFR Insights, and that's actually, I've been kind of having fun doing that because it's more of an ideological section rather than just talking about gun shows or whatever. And so you will have an episode of CCFR Insights in a little bit. Now, the one thing I'm going to do before I go to that is I'm going to answer some CCFR questions. Basically, I put out a request on our closed Facebook group about for people to come up with questions, and I would answer them in the next episode. So I've got a couple. They aren't a whole lot of fun, but they do spur some conversation about the CCFR. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop for a break, and when I come back, I'm going to answer a couple of these questions submitted by members.
The media constantly make a connection between licensed gun owners and criminal use of firearms. Whether it's intentional or not, the effect is the same. The average non-gun owning Canadian agrees with our country's ineffective and prejudicial regulations. There is one organization in Canada that focuses on taking back public opinion, and that's the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. Stand up for your own ability to own and use firearms. Donate now or become a member at www.firearmrights.ca.
All right, welcome back. Let's answer a couple of these questions. So, Graham Bindle says, any plans for an AGM in Saskatchewan? Well, Graham, I'm going to tell you honestly, there's no plans for an AGM in Saskatchewan at this point. We did make at some level a plan to have an AGM in another part of Canada, but this question, thanks for your question, because it kind of prompts us to talk about this. There is some talk at the board level about not having in-person AGMs for now. And let me tell you why we are kind of in conversations about that. AGMs, we don't have very extravagant AGMs. I think we do them really well. And Tracy Wilson To be honest, Tracy Wilson organizes virtually everything for these things, and she does just a phenomenal job. And they're good. We get major value for the money. I wouldn't want to be negotiating against her because she's really hard-nosed and poor suppliers. But anyway, better for us, I guess. We do save a fair bit of money for what we get in value. But the problem is an AGM costs anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000 to do. And really at the last one, we were just like, I don't know if this is the best use of membership money. And the reason why any associations or publicly traded corporations or whatnot, the reason why they have AGMs is because it's an actual requirement. That's why you see all the other organizations, whether they're firearm organizations or not, have in-person AGMs. But I think legally we could do a virtual AGM where we're doing a web meeting and we're just webcasting that. And if we were to webcast a web meeting, depending on the logistics there, I think we could actually do that for free. I don't know. I can't see it costing more than $1,000. So for me, having a big lineup of all the valuable things that we want to do for gun owners, because the real goal is not to create this cool organization where we're having these awesome AGMs and we have awesome materials and all that stuff. It's really all we're trying to push our effort in a certain direction. And if publicity and paying for advertising and stuff, if that pushes our effort forward, that's great. That's good use of member money. But I have a hard time with the AGM, and there's some other people in our group that have a hard time spending that money. So we may do something that, again, another organization has never done, which is not have in-person AGM so that we can divert those funds to, doing all the other things, explainer videos or advertising or lobbying or any of that other stuff. So anyway, what I would really appreciate, guys, is I'd appreciate your opinion on that, because it's one thing for all of us to make a decision. We're making the best decisions that we can as a group, but I'd really like to know what you think of it. So go ahead and send me an email at podcast@firearmrights.ca if you've got an opinion on whether we should continue to have in-person AGMs like everybody else, or just save that money and divert it to advocacy efforts. So as you know, I think you can detect I have a certain opinion, and a few of us do as well. But anyway, I'd always welcome your opinion on that. All right. So thanks, Graham, for that question. And it kind of spurred a different conversation than you thought it would have, maybe. Another question comes to us from Jeff Pelche, and he said, how much lobbying with the actual powers that be, meaning currently in office liberal politicians, has the CCFR done, and how many people have you actually reached out to in order to open a dialogue? And that's a good question. Recently, Tracy Wilson became a registered lobbyist for the CCFR, a full-time registered lobbyist, I guess you could call it. And the reason why we've never set out to be a lobby organization, because only so much can be done by lobbying. And this is going to open a lot more discussion, but I'm going to try to keep it short. The reason that Tracy Wilson became a registered lobbyist is because she was visiting with politicians and other bureaucrats anyway, and it started actually just to be compliant. So there's compliant issues when you're discussing policy and legislation and regulation with politicians, and that's that you register as a lobbyist. So Tracy sort of had to do that for us to be in compliance. At the same time, we found that because of our message and the way that we operate and maybe the people involved, I don't know, that politicians started coming to us. And we're not going to turn those relationships away. So that's why we're responding to that. And, if that kind of by gravitation, just by circumstance, drew us into lobbying, then that's fine. We're actually in a good spot because Tracy lives in Ottawa, so there's no travel or very little travel, parking and whatever that we will reimburse her for. But it's very inexpensive for us to have a lobbyist actually virtually resident on the Hill. So it just seemed to be a natural fit and the right direction to go in. Now, as far as contact with the Liberal government, we've had quite a bit of contact with the Liberal government. And, to my surprise, I have people in public safety that actually call me on my cell phone, and that's great. And as I've said before, I have mentioned that before, we do have open dialogue, but that doesn't mean that they're going to take our advice. Now, what I'm going to kind of read into Jeff's question is, are we having influence on the Liberal government? And this is the thing. I think a lot of people think maybe they've been instructed this way or they've been fed this through over the years. The only way to get change is to lobby government, is to influence government. It's like, well, yeah, that's sort of true. But the problem is governments tend to stick to their agendas and they make political promises and they try to keep their promises from time to time, right? Certainly when it's convenient. And no matter how much lobbying you're going to do with the liberal government, there's no liberal government, there's no conservative government that's ever going to say, you know what, yeah, we're going to have no rules whatsoever. We're going to end licensing, let's say. And that's just a reality that, that you're going to have to accept if you want to be happy at some level. And if you want to have the drive to continue pushing it towards that direction. So no matter how much you do that, the liberals are not going to make positive change for us. We can try to influence them. We have an open dialogue. I would dare to say that we have the most dialogue with the liberal government when it comes to firearm issues than anyone. But whether that's going to help or not, I don't know. Being a realist, being a directionalist, and you're gonna hear that term later in this episode. I am just glad that we have an open dialogue and that they are listening to our opinions and our rationale and our reasoning. It doesn't mean they're going to do anything, but for me, being a directionalist, my goal is to just stop things from getting worse if we can, if at all possible, and just to get to the next election cycle. Because if you look at the Liberal Party platform, it's not very friendly to gun owners. If you want to see boots on the ground, how many times we interact with any government, whether it's liberal with liberals or not, with any government official, you can always go to lobbycanada.gc.ca and you can look up the actual lobbying instances there. So anytime that Tracy or any other lobbyist goes to Ottawa and talks to someone, they have to log that contact and what we talked about there. So anyway, you can always check out that and look at how many monthly communication reports we're involved in, and you can look at how much lobbying anyone else is involved in. I think you can actually sort by keyword too, so you could type in firearms and find people who are talking to the government about firearm stuff. So kind of cool. You can check that out at your leisure. You know what? I'm going to talk about one more question. That's from Kozla Kersey. And he asks about the Wild TV project. What is the projected return on investment? Worst case scenario, best case scenario? I'm more interested in new membership numbers and income than measurable goodwill or unmeasurable goodwill, pardon me. So thanks, Cos, for your question. I've not known Cos to ask a lot of questions or to get too involved in Facebook. So it was great to see him kind of come out of the woodwork. So thanks, Cos. I'm being totally facetious. So if you're in our group, I'm sure you've run into Cos before. Big supporter of the CCFR. So we're very appreciative for his support. So that question, kind of the reason why I chose that question is it does give us an opportunity to talk to Wild TV. I'm going to make this quick because this is getting a little long. The reason why we're doing this Wild TV thing, if you haven't heard this before, I might even talked about this in the last episode, is because if you look at firearm owners that are involved in politics, it's around 20,000, and there's a variety of different. Yeah, that's right. I think I did a video where I mentioned that, and that's less than 1% of licensed gun owners, much less all gun owners. And we just need to get more people interested. So the reason for Wild TV is we are going straight to the choir to do some preaching, as it were. But what we're trying to do is get people more politically active that are in the firearms community. These are people that have a vested interest in their ability to own and use firearms. And we just want to make sure that they know that there's options available, because clearly firearm groups we have a marketing problem, right? We have less than 1% participation. So that's a real issue. So can I tell you for sure that this is going to help, that there's any firearm association in Canada that might end up with 100,000 individual members as a result of that advertising? I don't know. I can't tell you that. Nobody can tell you that. Not even Wild TV. But Wild TV has somewhere around 2.5 million subscribers, is my understanding, somewhere over 2 million subscribers. So we're hoping that we're going to get, by going mainstream exposure, we're going to capture more people or get that message to more people than just on social media or just on firearm forums or just through word of mouth. Again, it's funny. I said that we were the only group to ever do this, and somebody tried to correct me on that. I did check with Wild TV. They've never done anything like what we're doing with them. So I don't know if there's other information there. Feel free to correct me. I'm more than happy to be corrected. So so that's the reason why we're doing it. And we have some demographic statistics from Wild TV, but how big our message, how well our message is going to be received, or how big it's going to be after, we don't know. Anyhow, that's about it for this section. What I'm going to do is we're going to take a quick break and come back with CCFR Insights.
It's a fact that licensed gun owners do not represent a disproportionate risk to public safety. Yet whether it's backdoor gun registries, complex regulations, or unreasonable penalties for paperwork offenses, Canada's anti-gun bureaucrats will never stop trying to eliminate your will or ability to own and use firearms. Take action. Take a stand and join the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights by visiting us at www.firearmrights.ca.
And now, only on CCFR Radio, CCFR Insights.
Hey everybody, on this episode of CCFR Insights, I want to talk about the ideological spectrum that we see in the firearms community. So how do I explain this in practical terms if you don't already know what I'm talking about? Well, gun owners we all have a different ideological stance on the role of firearms in a free and equitable society. And there are kind of extreme sides, extreme opinions on this spectrum. And then there's moderate, views all the way through the middle. So let's talk about the extremes so that we're all sort of on the same page. So in practical terms, I might say that one extreme of the ideological spectrum would be the individual that owns, a bolt-action rifle. They believe that the only, appropriate or legitimate reason to own a firearm is to hunt. And those people might also believe that, any firearm that carries more than 2 rounds is inappropriate, because if you can't kill a deer with 2 rounds, then you probably shouldn't own a firearm anyway. You're incompetent and a danger to public safety. Now, I'm not going to comment. So anyway, on the other side of the political spectrum, you might have someone that says, hey, absolutely no regulation is acceptable in Canadian society when it comes to the possession and use of firearms. So maybe these people would believe that you should be able to buy an M249, squad automatic weapon at a corner store with no ID, and that anything that infringes upon that, and shoot it anywhere you want, drive around with it in the front seat with you, and anything that infringes upon that is a step too far. So now I'm nobody to say that either of these people have the wrong opinion, their opinion, and I also have a kind of a personal ideology where I don't impress my values on anyone else. I think the only question is that we all don't have our own country. We're all living in one big country with a lot of people and in a democracy, which in my opinion isn't the greatest system ever either, because it's just another way to say mob rule. But it's the system that we have. Now, what I've encountered, we're going to cut it off there. So what I've encountered is, people that run anywhere in the middle of these ideological extremes. And the problem is that this spectrum causes a lot of division in our community. And that division results in us not being able to move forward as a group very well. So if you look at, at a cross section of people that fit in any of these different places on that spectrum, you have most people are okay, and they're going to step up and they're going to help in the advocacy effort and maybe join a group. And it's a small cross section in overall gun owners, but let's say the people that are active. And then you'll have, people that kind of fit in on getting close to one extreme or the other, and they tend to have very, very strong opinions. And in fact, if your ideology doesn't match up with theirs precisely, they don't want to help. They don't want to be part of your group, and they can't see the larger benefit for themselves that exists when people stand together and they work together. Now, there is a small group of people in that spectrum in our community that will actively try to actually undermine your efforts because your ideology doesn't align with theirs, even though your work is directly benefiting them. Now, that's the real problem that we're kind of alluding to. Now, hold on to that thought for a second. There's something that I do in my free time. I always like to listen to interviews and lectures, and I'm always looking for people to listen to that are smarter than me. And there's a whole lot of people out there that fit that profile, right? Like quite a few. So I came across this interview And it was with a guy named Mike Munger. And Mike Munger is a professor of economics, political science, and public policy at Duke University. That's in North Carolina. If not that that's useful information, but that's where Duke is. And a very smart guy. And he has a lot of very different opinions than I do, but very well thought out opinions and positions on different political topics and policy topics. And that's why I actually found this interview to be really interesting, because these were very well developed arguments, and they made a lot of sense, and they're arguments that I wouldn't normally agree with. So anyway, long story short, sorry about that. I digress. But long story short, it was a very interesting interview, and he was talking about a certain situation where he ran for governor. So this is a state position in the U.S. So it would be the equivalent here in Canada to running for premier. So Mike Munger runs for governor, and he, during this interview, and I'm going to play it for you. It's only about 2 minutes long, but I just thought it was such a perfect articulation of the problem of these ideological spectrums. So he he was running as a libertarian, and his interaction with the voters, libertarian voters, was quite interesting. So I'm going to play this for you right now. Check it out, and I'll come back and kind of make a comparison to our community versus what he had to say.
Here's what happens at libertarian meetings. The first one, 20 or 30 people show up, and they're all enthusiastic.
Yeah.
And at the second meeting, 10 people show up. And the 10 say, I'm really glad those others didn't come back. They weren't real libertarians. Because what they're mainly concerned about is checking each other's papers. So you can tell if it's a real libertarian meeting by how long is it before there's an argument about whether individuals should be able to own nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
Nobody cares about that. When I was running for governor, people would say, would you end the Fed?
Yeah.
I'm running for governor, actually. This is not a state. Yeah, but I want to know. So what we really care about is ideological purity, because if you cared about actual policy or winning, you would suck it up and be a Democrat or Republican.
Right.
So the problem that we have as libertarians is that I don't think people conceive themselves as being part of a political process. They think of themselves as outre, as being outside and truth tellers, the keepers of a last flickering remnant of truth.
Yeah.
And that's just not a very effective political strategy.
That's interesting, because to me, after doing this show for about 2 years and having, a lot of classical liberals on, a lot of libertarians, and I've had progressives and conservatives and everything, that to me, basically the difference that I see between classical liberals and libertarians is a little more realistic utility for the state. So when someone comes in with that question and says to you, well, you're going to get rid of the Fed, and you go, I'm running for governor, and also that's a really high level philosophical thing that that to me, it's just a more realistic approach to how to change things. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Yes, and I've made a distinction in a couple of things that I've written between directional and destinationist libertarians. Destinationist libertarians have a particular libertopia in mind, and anything that's not like that is out. Directionalists would want to say, are there policies that we could choose that would be cheaper, lower deficits, lower the power of the state, and increase personal responsibility and liberty? The only acceptable libertarian policy is the immediate elimination of all taxes.
Right. Again, this is the part that is not the realistic part.
Because they're destinationists.
Yeah.
So the destinationists are always going to be there. Libertarians, if they're going to have any success, are going to have to appeal to the directionalists in both parties that say, look, the government has too many powers. We may disagree about how far back we want to move it, but let's move the train in the other direction. We're going the wrong way. So I think there's a consensus we should move it back. Where we get off the train, that's a different question.
Yeah.
But let's change the direction.
So what I found was really interesting in this was that Professor Munger kind of boiled down how these people, how they think, and maybe how they're motivated, which you have some people that are directionalists and some people that are destinationists. And I see the same thing in our community. I see people that say, well, wherever I think, whatever our perfect utopia looks like, there's no way that I'm going to even help. And sometimes they'll actively undermine your efforts. As I said before the clip, they won't participate in anything that pushes it in that direction, because unless you are going exactly to the same place as they are, they're not interested. And now when I talk about the people that actively undermine other gun owners, just as a result of their own ideology, that's a relatively small group of people. And I think the issue there has less to do with their understanding on how to get political change as it does to do with their personalities or maybe some other issues in their lives, because it really doesn't, it's not rational, right? It's almost like if I'm driving from Vancouver to Toronto and you need a ride to Calgary and I'm driving right through there on my way to Toronto, wouldn't you want to ride to Calgary and I'll drop you off on the way rather than just sit here and go, nope, I'm only going to get into a car with somebody that's going to Calgary. Of course it doesn't make any sense. So anyway, I just thought it was kind of an insightful thing. I thought it was a really neat clip. And I think, we're never going to get anywhere. I mean, obviously, a directionalist is something that's a strategy that's a little bit more politically effective, but I really believe that we're not going to get anywhere until we all start pulling together, until an attack on one is an attack on all gun owners, no matter what kind of shooting sports or pastimes or what you do with your guns. So, I'm always doing everything that I can to quell the division, get rid of it, eliminate that division, so that we can all help each other to get where we need to be. So anyways, hopefully you enjoyed this episode of CCFR Insights. Don't forget to comment on our Facebook page. You'll find that if you just search for CCFR Radio on our Facebook page, you'll find that, and share this podcast. Hopefully we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for listening. Take care.
This is another episode of the CCFR Radio Podcast. Remember, if you don't stand up for your own ability to own and use firearms, who will? Join the CCFR or donate right now at www.firearmrights.ca.